my name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and filmed live every Sunday night here at the Irish Pub in Atlantic City.
And I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon, welcoming you to the better half of our weekend after a very busy first half. And with the widespread tidal flooding yesterday, I think that's kind of a good start to our conversation. We welcome our weekly guest. Different guest every week. We're really honored to have Margate City Fire Chief Dan Adams with us today. Chief, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here tonight.
All right, I guess first we always just like to, have our guests introduce themselves.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up where you are now.
My name's Dan Adams. I'm the chief of the Margate City Fire Department. I got hired in the city of Margate in June of 1991. My career in fire service actually goes back to prior to that. My grandfather and father were both chiefs of the Longport Volunteer Fire Department, and it was just something that I was always drawn to and always wanted to be a part of. And the fact that you can help someone in a time of need is what it's all about, and that's why I do this job every day.
And you've been chief for how long now?
I just got chief in February of this past year. I was deputy chief for 8 years prior to that, and chief just since February of 2018.
Well, belated congratulations.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you having you here on Tidal Flooding Talk.
It's my pleasure.
Now, what was your experience like as deputy chief and now fire chief dealing with coastal flooding events and these major storms that affect Margate?
We've been dealing with several different storms. The two that really stand out to me start off with Hurricane Irene when that was approaching, and then also obviously Superstorm Sandy, as we all know. But we actually start the preparations days in advance when we know a storm is approaching. And let me tell you that the forecast for Sandy was right on the mark. 5 days before they were telling us it's going to take a left turn and come right in toward New Jersey, and lo and behold, it did. And we had our plan in place. We knew what we were going to do. And, we're a small fire department in Margate, so we don't have a lot of resources. So what we did was we brought everybody back, and we had a plan, and we had a staggered approach to bringing them back to work. And we got everybody back in, and we worked in operational periods for the storm, and it made things really easy for us. And having that plan and having it in place, we had our shelter operations ready to go in the event that they were needed. Was just helpful in the end because we ended up opening the shelter and sheltering 55 people during Sandy.
Now, I do have a follow-up to that. You mentioned your firefighters. What is that like for them? Do they work days and days in a row? Do they take turns,
Well, it's funny you say that.
resting?
We kind of gave them the heads up 3 days out to kind of prepare yourself at home. Because obviously we all worry about our families first and foremost, but we have a commitment to the city of Margate to provide a service, and that's what it's about. So they prepared, got their families together, but then what we did was we broke down. We started out with 4-hour operational periods. Normal operational period under the incident management systems, usually 8 to 12 hours in an operation. So what we did was we reduced it to 4 hours due to the temperature of the water in that. We had, our ice rescue suits that everybody was wearing and prepared to wear. But when they were going out and they were getting beat up in the time, we changed that operational period to every 3 hours and rotated our personnel accordingly.
Now, this weekend, we like to tout Sandy, and I appreciate you saying, hey, great forecast, because that was one of the best ones meteorologists ever made in South Jersey with days and days warning.
Was that yours?
Well, amongst the many who got it right. But this past weekend, yesterday's nor'easter, very well advertised. We were talking about it for 7 to 10 days, and coastal flood warnings were up, and people should have been prepared for tidal flooding. But that being said, water came up about a half a foot higher than forecast. What was your experience like with this storm yesterday in Margate, where, all right, it over-exceeded expectations a little bit? Does that lead to people being a little less prepared, more cars in water, more
I would
rescues?
say there was a little bit of complacency going on that day, but, on Friday, like I said, we prepared our plan that we normally do. We had our 5-ton trucks ready to go. We moved one to each station, had them readily available. I put out an order to our officers so they were prepared, telling them when to put the 5-ton trucks in service, when to take our frontline service, trucks out. And, obviously we don't want to put a $750,000 piece of equipment into floodwater and ruin it. So we ran the 5-ton trucks during the storm, and maybe even some of our local businesses might not be real happy with us because maybe they caused a little wake, but that's part of the process, and it's all about public safety. But We did get a message out through the media a little bit to tell the people to be prepared, to people in low-lying areas to move their vehicles to higher ground, and to do the normal precautions. If you were born and raised here and you lived here and you've lived through these storms in the past, you know what to do and you know how to be prepared.
As far as water rescues go, or let's say cars that get stuck in floodwaters or whatnot, I mean, do you find that with every storm? Do you find it's locals? Do you find it's maybe people visiting the area that are less familiar with things? Because, the Weather Service is a moniker that is great. It's don't drown, turn around, a little rhyming there. But driving through floodwaters is something, seems to happen in every single storm.
It does, and people want to get out and see what's going on, and we try to tell them, heed the warning, to stay inside when the storms are happening. One of the key components we did put out there as well was, if you get in any trouble, call 911 immediately. Don't wait. Don't try and rescue yourself. Don't be a victim. Let us be the people, the trained professionals, to come out and make the rescues and do what we do. But as far as that, I would say probably it's more people that don't know the area that get themselves into trouble. Especially, we'll have car rescues in a normal thunderstorm in the summer where Amherst Avenue might flood, where cars come off Jerome and turn right onto Amherst and then get stuck, and we got to go get them. So that's normal for us, and that's a normal operation. But for the most part, the people that live here do know and do understand, and they're usually prepared for it.
Now, what do you think visitors or other people should do if they don't know which streets could possibly be flooded?
Well, if they're not aware, maybe they keep an eye on the forecast and that, and talk to people. Call City Hall, call the fire department, and ask information, and try and look and see if there's something they can find out to prepare themselves better. I know when something big's going on, Atlantic County OEM is right on top of it, and they always get the information out. The reverse 911 call system is always putting information out there, and that's important. But you need to heed the warnings of the professionals, and that's the forecasters too, and listen to what they're telling you. Because if you make the decision to stay, or you make the decision to go into that high water, now you're putting the rescuers in harm's way as well, and that could be a problem.
Now, what's that like as a rescuer? Let's say we have a major event, like a Sandy or a storm with high winds, with massive flooding. Like, Sandy was an instance where there were mandatory evacuations. Not everyone evacuated, and then they're calling 911 during the height of the storm. You guys are not supposed to go out.
We're not.
When the conditions are so bad. Do you guys do anyway? Because human life, you guys are amazing individuals in what you do, and you buck that and you go out? Or do you say to people, hey, listen, we can't go out in these conditions, and you really should heed those evacuation warnings?
People really should listen, and they really should heed the warnings, and people tell them, and look what just happened down in North Carolina and in Florida. People were told to leave, people were told to get out, they stayed, and the first responders could not get to them. It was unsafe. It just was to the point that they could not reach them or get to them. We have, policy through Atlantic County, and we actually have the policy in the Margate City Fire Department that when the sustained winds get over 50 miles an hour, we cease all operations. And we have to do that for the safety of all of our members. Right. All it takes is one sign, one piece of wood, something, a projectile, and you could lose one of your firefighters or one of the rescuers. And it's my responsibility now as the chief to make sure that doesn't happen. So we'll take risk when we can, but we also have to shut it down when it's unsafe and make sure our people are safe.
And I think it drives meteorologists and emergency managers crazy when you have days warning to evacuate, and people know the dangers. They stay, and then they're calling you guys, and it's only a matter of time before an emergency responder doing something heroic like you guys do does get injured or does get killed. Doing what you do, and that's why it's so important to heed the evacuation orders. My follow-up question is, how do we get the message out? You mentioned Irene, you mentioned Sandy. Irene, a lot of people left, wasn't as bad as forecast. They came back and saw that, so less people actually evacuating in Sandy, even though different storm, different forecast. It's human nature to say, all right, whatever way happened last time, that's what's going to happen this time. So how do you get the word out that, hey, that's not the case? When there's an evacuation order, you really have to evacuate.
I'd say you got to heed the warnings. When people tell you to evacuate, you got to get out and you got to take that. And I agree with you. We had a lot of people leave in Irene. We had less people leaving Sandy, and then the fact that they weren't able to get back for days really is going to change people's minds in the future for leaving. And a lot of them are going to take that risk. It's not the risk to take. The idea is to get out, get to a safe place, and be safe. Whether that's just a few miles inland, that's a safer place than being here along the coast. We've seen it. We saw the water come from both sides, the ocean and the bay. And it's really, it's horrifying to see this. I mean, we had people calling us during Sandy saying that they left their animals in their house. Can we go get them? And it was like, but, we made an effort in some cases, and we do what we can. But again, it comes down to safety and being safe and doing what's right.
Yeah, we do urge people to make a plan specific for their household, because everyone does have a different family, they pets, elderly people, or if you're just a single person, every plan might be different. But what happens if they really don't have a place to go or the means to leave?
Well, most of the time when we have a big event that's being, forecasted, the shelters are going to be in place. Understand, they try not to have shelters on the barrier island. It's kind of like a shelter of last resort or something of that nature. They do open the shelters on the mainland. I know they had one at St. Augustine Prep. They had them at other locations. And we actually, once we could get the people out from Margate, we did bus several people out to one of the other locations. And we only held them till the storm subsided, and then people either left on their own or they were taken to another area or shelter.
So saying I couldn't leave is not an excuse.
It's really not, because there's ways to get you there, and there's people to help, and transportation and everything else to make sure people get off the island and get to a safe location.
What's your experience? We encourage everyone to leave. Well, your job dictates you stay on the island, and all your the brave firefighting men and women stay on the island. What's the experience of someone that has been front row seat of significant tidal flooding, of storm surge, of these hurricane force winds along the shore? What's your 2 cents on the power of Mother Nature?
Mother Nature is unbelievable, and to watch that water rise quickly, and I could even flash back to December '92 storm. I was on the fire department just for a year. We had battled a big fire from the wind that caused wires to come down on a building that lit off this whole building on Pacific Avenue, and we battled that, and then all of a sudden we turn around and water's coming from both directions right on top of us, and it was like, wow. Like, it was pretty fearful, and I was young, man. I was 21, 22 years old at the time, so to me I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. But you hear the different stories from my dad and my grandparents from the March of '62 storm, and you think it can't happen or it won't happen, and guess what? It's going to happen, and it's going to happen again, and we need to be ready for it. To watch the force of water, you can't stop it. There's no, and a tidal surge, I can't even imagine. We were lucky in both of the storms that hit this area, in Irene and Sandy, that the surge wasn't as bad as it was up north in Maniloking, or what it was just down in Florida in this most recent, Hurricane Michael. To have that kind of destruction, or what the potential could be in this area, it's going to be catastrophic. There's going to be lives lost, and that's why the people need to get out and get to a safe area and a safe place.
And that's one thing people don't realize, that you hear on the news all the time: Category 1, Category 2, Category 5. We rank hurricanes based on wind, and wind gets all the respect and wind gets all the headlines. It's the water that is the most deadly part of any hurricane. The rain and the storm surge, that kills more people than wind ever does. So we're not going to get a Category 5 hurricane in Margate or the Jersey Shore, but we are going to get a storm surge that can be of a Category 3, 4, 5 caliber. Sandy's storm surge up in Maniloking and Sandy Hook was a Category 4 storm surge. The wind wasn't there, but the water was. You make a good point. That water is, just to be surrounded by it, to see how quickly it could come up, is terrifying if you choose not to evacuate and if you're stuck along the shore.
Yeah, I remember one of the storms, and my dad telling a story. It had started to flood already, and he was walking to the firehouse. We lived on 29th Street in Longport. The firehouse in Longport was 23rd. And I remember him telling a story when he got to like 25th Avenue. All of a sudden, the bay and the ocean were meeting right at Atlantic Avenue there, and it literally swept him off his feet. Thankfully, he was able to gain himself some area, and get up, and he grabbed onto a pole and got up and was able to make his way to the firehouse. But it can happen, and it can knock someone down, and the unprepared. And I think I remember a story too from Manilokin of someone that survived and said they would never stay again. They would leave no matter what because of what they went through and what they experienced.
And
So,
I think that is a similar story to anyone who stays and the worst case scenario happens. Worst case scenario is not always going to happen, aka Irene, but when it does, you'll never find a person that stayed, that survived, that will ever stay again.
well, it's funny. I still remember, even looking back in time, I remember Hurricane Bell in 1976, being a young kid in Longport. And I remember we evacuated to the mainland, to my uncle's house or something in Egg Harbor Township. And you came back the next day, there was homes like off their foundations. There was, I remember, like 4 or 5 inches of the orange, asphalt dirt through all the streets. And then the same thing I remember as, being in high school when we evacuated for Hurricane Gloria. And it was a similar occurrence, and we got lucky there. In those situations, Gloria passed offshore a little bit. If that had come closer, it could have been a lot worse. And
Absolutely.
it's heed the warnings of the professionals, heed the warnings of the forecasters, the weather service people, and listen to them. And if you need help getting off, talk to your local people, and they'll find a way to help you and assist you in getting off the island before it strikes. You guys give us well enough notice in advance with these forecasts to make a decision to leave early, and that's what
Not
people
like a
need to do.
tornado.
Right, yeah. Hurricanes are days, tornadoes are minutes, but tornadoes will never cause flooding. Hurricanes and nor'easters do. Yep.
And like at the derecho, when we had that, hit us a few years back, we had no warning for that. It was coming, and it was coming quick, and you had to react and do what you had to do. But again, same situation. I mean, that was, the winds in that were unbelievable.
We're stronger than anything we've
Yeah,
ever seen in a
anything.
nor'easter or hurricane. Yeah, amazing.
Yep.
And ironically, water can actually cause fires. Can you explain that a little bit, how floodwaters can...
Absolutely. We had 2 electrical-related incidents yesterday due to the water. One was water got into one of the storefronts and shorted out an outlet strip on the floor, and it just started filling the building with smoke, and nobody knew what the actual source was until our guys got there and found it. And the other was on the front of one of the business properties where an outside outlet, same thing. Hours later, after the water receded, they had a problem and the outlet shorted out. And that was a problem prevalent after Sandy. Of all these homes that took water into the crawl space area and some of the exposed wiring, or maybe the junction boxes got wet, these are things you have to look at after the storm. When you're doing your post-storm wrap-ups of your homes and properties, you need to make sure that everything is safe. And the same thing now, after the storm yesterday. If any people in low-lying areas took water, they really should be checking out all their stuff to see if there was any electrical outlets or any electrical equipment that took water, because it can short out. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but eventually over time it could be a problem. We had lingering effects from Sandy 6-8 months after, where we had electrical related incidents. So it doesn't necessarily have to happen right away. It can happen over a long period of time.
And it's just the start of nor'easter season. I mean, October to May, it's supposed to be a busy winter, so it could very well happen again. So really good advice. Troy Eddy, appreciate you being on. Kristen Kaiser says congratulations on becoming chief.
Thank you.
She appreciates you
Well
having here.
deserved.
Absolutely. Roger Cope checking in as always. He is regular status. Sharon Peter, Kelly Farr. Nice to have you on. Paula Sabati, Angela Gonzalez, hi to you. Jeff Davis, Teresa Scher, hi to you. Let's see. Paula Angela says thanks for your service, Chief. Angela Gonzalez, are there any shelters for people in the area? I mean, you know, not so much along the shore, but more so farther in.
Yeah, but
right?
we do have equipment, and we're prepared if we have to in the event that a last resort type thing. We don't even like to say it. We don't advertise it. We don't put it out there, but we're prepared if something does go wrong. But the shelters will be in place far enough away from the potential, worst case scenario or worst case areas. And the county is great, like I said. You know Vince Jones, the emergency management coordinator. The county OEM, they do a great job. They're always making sure that we're prepared and getting the information out. when they open the operations center, it makes our lives a lot easier because they handle a lot of the stuff that normally we would have to handle on an individual basis. So it makes our lives easier.
And unfortunately, we've had a lot of practice over the last, like, 5-10 years. So while Irene, the first major evacuation in a long time, there were a few hiccups. You know, the pet shelters weren't quite there yet. We've had Sandy, we've had Jonas, we've had other experiences where I think things have gotten much, much better with each storm. Each storm, meteorologists learn what we can do better, but so do everyone else in the emergency field as well. We learn where there's some deficiencies, we learn what we do well, and we get better at it with each following storm.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do that on a regular basis, and you know, it's called a post-incident critique, and we'll do the same thing after a storm when we have situations in that, and even looking back after just Friday, you know, with this storm that hit yesterday, maybe we could have done a little bit more, you know, as far as preparation, but everything went, you know, without a hitch, so to speak, and we're happy with that, and we were prepared. Like I said, we have the 5-ton trucks. We have 3 that are in service for the fire department alone. The police department has another 2 in Margate. So we do have the capabilities of getting out there and making the rescue or the save if needed, and providing the service for fire protection if needed in the event that something goes wrong in a high water area.
Now, what do you think are the greatest challenges of providing this protection for your community?
You know, that's a tough question, but, you know, the greatest challenge is probably just making sure that we're prepared beforehand, to have a plan of action. Like I said, when we got prepared for Sandy, we started writing the plan of action, you know, the incident action plan, so to speak, 4 days in advance. So we kind of knew what we were going to do. And then once we got a chance, we called our officers in, spoke to all of them, our supervisors. We laid out the plan with them, and we got a plan of action set. And we worked, like I said, we worked in operational periods and gave personnel time off versus time working. So
now,
we tried to make sure they were safe.
Who was involved with creating that plan?
Well, for the fire departments, it's usually the administrative staff of the chief and deputy chief, and then we lean on our captains and lieutenants as well. But we also meet with the city emergency management team, which consists of the fire department, the police department, the emergency management coordinator, the public works department, city, you know, officials, whether it's the mayor, commissioners, etc. We'll sit down, and we did that multiple times in you know, prior to Sandy coming and prior to Sandy striking, and then we met afterward to get our plan of action for getting the people back into town, which was probably the biggest heartache to people and the biggest problem. They wanted to get back and see what their properties were and what was going on, and they weren't able to, and it was kind of like it was shut down the entire area. So
I want to mention a comment here. It's meant to be a little critical, but I think we can actually build conversation off of it. Jim says, come on, guys, it's water, not like it's the first time, and it won't be the last time. And Jim's right. We have tidal flooding all the time. We have it year-round. It will continue to happen. But in that respect, how many cars stalled out driving through water they shouldn't have been driving through yesterday?
Yeah,
how many
I think
people?
Water is actually the most costly damages that occur here.
Right.
So,
and there's nothing you can do about it, but there's a lot of preventable losses that come with storms. And I think, you know, you have a $30,000 car and you're driving it through water and, you know, it stalls out. It has to be towed out. You have to be rescued from the water. If it is something that happens all the time, that is something that should never really be happening, right?
No, absolutely not. And, you know, part of that when you think about it is these people need to have a plan in place for themselves beforehand. You know, follow what the Red Cross advises and that. But as far as you're saying with the vehicles, they need to move them to higher ground before this storm comes. They know where they live. They know it's a low-lying area. They know that there's going to be problems. They need to have the plan in place and be prepared. You know, one of the things I look at when I look at all this is the 100-year storm seems to be coming every 5 years now. Right. So it's not like, you know, everybody talked about it. My grandparents talked about, oh, we got to worry about the 100-year storm. Well, we're looking at storms now every year, every other year, or something that it's similar to what was related to be the 100-year storms. Right. And it's going to continue to happen. And just have a plan, be prepared, be safe. If you get in trouble, call for help. We'll do our best, but if it becomes unsafe, we have to shut it down in certain operations, and we will do that.
And yesterday's nor'easter also taught us, too, it doesn't have to be a hurricane. It doesn't have to have a name. It can just be an ordinary October, December, February nor'easter that can cause some problems. That can keep you guys busy, and that can keep residents kind of, on their toes as well.
Absolutely. When you've been following the weather and doing the weather here for a long time, and you see it, Ocean City, Wildwood, Margate, Ventnor, Atlantic City, the low-lying areas have always been, look at the Black Horse Pike. Every time we get even some full moon tides or a new moon or something of that nature, the Black Horse Pike gets shut down. It happens all the time.
Yep.
So, just be prepared, have a plan, and know what to do in the event that something's going to happen.
Well, you did mention the wakes that are caused by people driving. So, really, if you're choosing to drive through these flooded waters, you're not only risking it for yourself, but you could be causing damage to other people's properties or cars that are parked along the
Absolutely.
side.
In those situations, the only people that should be responding through the high water should be the first responders and the emergency personnel. Everybody else should stay out of the water, stay out of the water-affected areas. Turn your car around, don't drive through it. You said it earlier, that's the main component. Stay out of the water, stay clear, because now you're creating a problem for the businesses and residents, but also you're putting potential first responders in harm's way as well.
I had an old neighbor in Ocean City. I lived there for 12 years. And it's funny you bring that up. The water was up to their step. It wasn't in their house. Cars came flying by. And she's holding up a no wake sign on West Avenue, because every wake that comes through, the water gets into the house. So, you shouldn't be driving through water this deep regardless. So, very good point. Chief Adams, any last minute thoughts?
No,
I think you covered everything great.
I think if anybody has any questions, you can call upon us, but you can also go on readyatlantic.org. They always have a lot of valuable information as far as storm preparations and being prepared. But any of the municipalities, the same thing. Your Office of Emergency Management in each town will have information available for you to assist you and provide that for you.
And we have amazing, you mentioned the county level emergency management, local emergency management levels, and then we have amazing first responders that unfortunately just have been tested way too many times since 2009, I guess, when we started having blizzard after nor'easter. It's been a test, and you guys just come through it with flying colors every time, and I think we're lucky to have the people that we do. However, you should still hopefully evacuate and keep you guys nice and quiet and safe and warm in the firehouse when the worst hits and not out rescuing people.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that.
Well, Dan, the Irish Pub and the New Jersey Coastal Coalition would like to thank you for joining us tonight with an Irish Pub t-shirt.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. I'll wear it with true colors. Thank you.
And Chief, thank you for being here. We're at the Irish Pub, 7 o'clock every Sunday night. Different guests every week as well, all brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, working to increase awareness and just increase resiliency along the shore for storms like yesterday that can happen throughout the year. So you can join Palma and I on Facebook every Sunday night, or come on down here to the pub and watch live and chat with us after.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
good
nice
week.
night.
Have a good night. Thank you.